Before this story starts, tell me this in the comments. If your partner suddenly started hiding their phone, would you confront them right away or stay quiet and watch a little longer? Honestly, nights like this always make my chest tight, because once trust starts cracking inside a marriage, every small sound feels like a warning. Now let me tell you about a wife who thought she was being cheated on, only to discover something far darker. She thought her husband was only sneaking around with another woman, but at 2 in the morning, one glowing message pulled her straight toward a secret that had been buried for years. That was the truth waiting at the edge of a freezing Ontario night, while a wife stood inside her own kitchen believing the worst thing in her marriage was betrayal. 3 days later, the same woman would walk into a police station with shaking hands while the man who lied to her sat pale and speechless, realizing the address she found had destroyed everything he had tried to hide. Before we go deeper, do a quick check-in with me in the comments and type, "I'm here" plus the province or city you're watching from. And for everyone who keeps coming back, liking, and subscribing, may God make your burdens lighter, open better doors for you, and keep you safe in every season of life. Thank you for being here with me. Now listen carefully because this story still makes my hands shake when I think about it. My name is Julia, and by the time all of this happened, I had been married to Lee for almost 8 years. If you had met us in public back then, you probably would have thought we were one of those normal, tired couples trying to survive life in the suburbs outside Ottawa. We had a neat little detached house on a quiet street with 2 maple trees in front, a driveway that always needed shoveling in winter, and neighbors who knew just enough about each other to wave politely, but not enough to ask real questions. Lee worked in logistics for a regional transport company. I worked part-time from home doing bookkeeping for a dental clinic and picked up extra remote admin work when bills started stacking too high. From the outside, nothing about our marriage looked dramatic. We weren't the kind of couple who threw plates or screamed on the front lawn. We paid property tax. We bought groceries at Costco. We argued about hydro bills, snow tires, and whose turn it was to pick up toilet paper. But somewhere along the way, all the ordinary things that make a home feel warm had started to cool down. Lee used to text me on his lunch break just to ask if I wanted him to bring coffee home. He used to stand behind me while I cooked and steal pieces of roasted potato straight from the pan. He used to complain about work in a way that made me feel included, like we were still a team. Then slowly he stopped. At first it was easy to excuse. Busy season, he said. Staff shortages. A new route system. A difficult client. A manager who kept dumping late problems on him. I wanted to be a supportive wife, so I let a lot of things pass. When he started coming home at 10 or 11, I told myself adulthood was ugly sometimes. When he stopped eating the dinners I made and just reheated leftovers later without sitting with me, I told myself he was stressed. When he began taking his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, I laughed it off once and said, "Wow, should I be jealous of your screen time?" He didn't laugh back. He only slid the phone into his pocket and said, "It's work. You wouldn't understand how much they rely on me right now." That line stayed with me longer than it should have. You wouldn't understand. I was his wife. If there was anyone supposed to understand his stress, it should have been me. But more and more, Lee had started talking to me like I was a stranger standing in the way of some bigger burden. Every conversation with him felt like I had arrived in the middle of a meeting nobody invited me to. One night in November, while sleet tapped against the kitchen window and the street outside looked silver under the frozen rain, I asked him as gently as I could, "Are we okay?" He was standing at the counter with his tie loosened, scrolling through his phone with that hard little focus he used when he wanted to shut the whole world out. He didn't even look up. Why wouldn't we be? Because you barely talk to me anymore. I'm tired, Jules. I know you're tired. I'm asking if something else is going on. That made him look at me, but not with softness. More with irritation, like I had asked a stupid question at the worst possible moment. "You always do this when I'm exhausted," he said. "You build drama out of nothing." That word hit me harder than I let show. Drama. As if asking whether my marriage was falling apart was some silly hobby, I picked up to pass the time. I folded the dish towel in my hands just to stop them from shaking. "I'm not trying to fight. Then don't start one." I remember the kitchen light reflecting off the wet black granite counter, the smell of tomato soup still in the air, and the ache in my chest when he walked right past me and went upstairs without another word. That night I sat alone in the living room under a throw blanket, listening to the hum of the furnace and the soft rattle of freezing rain against the eaves. I kept asking myself if I had become too sensitive, too needy, too suspicious. That was the worst part of the change in Lee. He never had to openly say I was irrational every day. He only had to keep acting like my pain was inconvenient long enough for me to start doubting myself. That became the rhythm of our house. He came home late. I asked fewer questions. He guarded his phone. I pretended not to notice. He slept with his back to me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. Even in the dark. December came in hard that year. The sidewalks crusted over with old snow. Salt stains crept up everyone's boots. Christmas lights started appearing on the houses near ours, but ours stayed dark because Lee said he was too busy to help me bring the storage bins down from the garage loft. I could have done it alone, but at some point decorating for one person felt almost embarrassing. A week before Christmas, his mother called. Her name was Reynolds, though I had always called her Ray. She had one of those polished voices that sounded pleasant enough until you noticed there was no warmth behind it. Since the day Lee introduced me to his family, Ray had treated me like I was acceptable but temporary. Not terrible enough to openly complain about in public, but never fully welcomed either. She didn't ask how I was. She said, "Is Lee there?" "No, he's still at work." A pause. Again, that caught my attention.
"Yes."
"He's been working late a lot." Another pause, shorter this time.
"Well."
"Men get tired of heavy houses." I frowned. "I'm sorry." "Nothing," she said quickly, but not quickly enough. "Tell him I called." Then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen staring at the dead screen of my phone, hearing her words over and over. Men get tired of heavy houses. It sounded like one of those cruel half-statements designed to burrow under the skin. I wanted to tell myself she was just being Ray, just saying something vague and unpleasant for sport. But something about the tone in her voice made me feel like she knew more than I did. That evening when Lee came in, cheeks red from the cold, I said, "Your mom called." He shrugged off his coat. "Okay." She said something weird. She always says weird things. She said men get tired of heavy houses. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. So, what does that mean?" "It means my mother likes hearing herself talk."
"Lee, what?"
I took a breath. Does she know something I don't? His face changed then, but only for a second. A flash. Alarm. Maybe. Then it was gone. "No," he said flatly. "And you need to stop reading hidden meaning into every stupid sentence." He went upstairs with his coat, still half unzipped. I stood there with the grocery bag handles cutting into my fingers and felt something cold move through me. Not fear yet, just a growing certainty that I was no longer living inside a marriage where the truth moved freely. That same week, I found the first thing that should have forced me to wake up sooner. I was looking for our home insurance renewal papers in the office nook near the dining room because I needed to scan them for our records. Lee usually dumped unopened mail into a black accordion folder, and I had long ago become the person who sorted everything that looked remotely administrative. Inside the folder, tucked between a gas bill and an old vehicle registration slip, I found a folded sheet from a law office in Gatineau. At first I thought it was junk, but then I saw a child's name handwritten on a sticky note clipped to it. Mia. The document itself was incomplete, just a cover sheet and a reference number, but I could make out enough to know it involved a trust account review and a minor beneficiary. Beneath that was an address I didn't recognize.
I stared at it for a long time.
Lee, and I didn't have children. One of the quiet griefs of our marriage was that after years of trying, appointments, tests, and disappointments, nothing had happened for us. We had never fully stopped hoping, but the hope had become tired and fragile. Because of that, anything involving a minor beneficiary in our house stood out immediately. When Lee came home, I held up the paper and asked, "Who's Mia?" He barely glanced at it before taking it from my hand. "It's nothing." It doesn't look like nothing. It's a file from work. A trust account review for a child is work. Jewels, not everything in my life is your business. I felt myself go still. Your life? Or our life? He gave a frustrated laugh, but it had no humor in it. You're doing it again. Doing what? Taking a normal situation and turning it into some conspiracy. I hated how quickly shame followed those words, even when I knew he was pushing me away. Then explain it. I don't need to explain every piece of paper you snooped through. That one cut so deep I could barely respond. Snoop? I said quietly. I was looking for insurance documents. Well, next time don't dig through my stuff. He folded the page, slid it into his jacket pocket, and walked away. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not because I suddenly knew the truth, but because I realized Lee had started creating territories in our marriage that I was forbidden to enter.
His phone.
His late nights, his paperwork, his moods, his silence. It was all fenced off now, and every time I got close, he made me feel guilty for noticing the fence. A few days later, I saw him in town with a little girl. I was leaving the pharmacy after picking up migraine medication when I spotted him across the street near a cafe on Bank Street. Snowmelt and slush lined the curb, and people were hurrying by with scarves over their faces. Lee was standing outside the cafe door, bent slightly at the waist, smiling at a child in a pink hat with pom-poms. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. He zipped her coat carefully, then knelt to wipe something from her cheek with his thumb. The tenderness in that tiny gesture nearly stopped my breathing. Lee had once spoken that gently to me. He had once looked at me like I was part of his center. Standing beside the girl was a woman in a dark green parka. I could only see her profile, but she touched Lee's arm with an ease that was too familiar to be accidental. I ducked behind a parked SUV so fast I almost slipped. By the time I looked again, they had gone inside the cafe. I should have walked in. I should have confronted him right there with salt on the sidewalks and strangers all around. But something inside me locked up. Maybe I was afraid he would explain it away. Maybe I was afraid he wouldn't. That night, I asked where he had been during the afternoon. At work, he said without hesitation. You didn't leave for coffee?
No.
I watched his face carefully. Nothing. Not even a twitch. You're sure? He looked up from his plate. Why are you interrogating me? I'm asking a question. And I answered it. Then, in the same calm tone people use when they want to make someone else look unstable, he added, This obsession is getting unhealthy. I could hardly taste my food after that. That was the first time I cried in the downstairs bathroom with the tap running so he wouldn't hear me. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My eyes looked tired all the time. My skin had that dull winter look. My mouth had started turning downward even when I was neutral. I pressed a cold washcloth to my face and whispered, What is happening to you? No answer came. Only the sound of the furnace kicking on and the distant vibration of Lee's phone on the nightstand upstairs. Please pause here and tell me honestly in the comments. Would you have followed him into that cafe? Or would you have done what I did and waited for more proof? Because this is the kind of moment that can haunt you later when you start asking whether you ignored the warning signs because you were scared of what they might mean. The holidays passed in that ugly, strained way some marriages survive in public and fail in private. We had dinner at Ray's house in Canada with Lee's brother Martin and his wife Maya. Ray served turkey, buttery mashed potatoes, stuffing with sausage, and little dishes of cranberry sauce, as if she were hosting a magazine photo shoot instead of a family dinner. Everything in her house was spotless and beige and arranged just so. Even her disapproval felt polished. Halfway through dessert, Maya asked me, So, are you and Lee still thinking about trying fertility treatment again? I nearly dropped my fork. Ray looked down at her plate, but I knew that expression. She was enjoying herself. Lee said nothing. I forced a smile. We haven't talked about that recently. Maya made a little sympathetic face that somehow felt insulting. Well, these things happen for a reason. I didn't know what to say to that. Before I could answer, Ray added in a smooth voice, Some women are meant for certain things and not for others. Forcing life never ends well. The room went very quiet. I looked at Lee. He kept eating. Just kept eating. That hurt more than Ray's words. Later, In the car, while fresh snow drifted under the streetlights, I said, "Why didn't you say anything?" He gripped the steering wheel. "Because I didn't want a bigger scene." "A bigger scene? Your mother basically called me defective." "You know how she is." "That's exactly the problem, Lee." He sighed. "Jules, I can't do this tonight." "You never do this any night." He turned to me at a red light, and for a second there was something almost mean in his eyes. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold. Maybe if you stopped taking everything personally, people wouldn't have to walk on eggshells around you. I stared at him as if he had slapped me. When we got home, I went upstairs, closed the bathroom door, and sat on the edge of the tub with my coat still on. The silence inside me felt dangerous then, like the quiet before ice breaks under weight. I started replaying the past few years of my marriage in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. Every delayed explanation, every strange expense, every call he took outside, every family gathering where I was made to feel like a guest instead of a daughter-in-law. And suddenly another old grief rose up in me too. My sister. Her name was Leah. She had been 11 years older than me, so growing up she always felt half-sister, half-second mother. Leah was the brave one in our family. Loud laugh, fast driver, strong opinions. The kind of woman who would walk into a room and make even nervous people feel protected. She had lived in Montreal for several years, then moved back to Ontario after getting pregnant. The father was never fully part of the picture. She said she would handle things her own way. Then, 7 years ago, Leah died in what everyone called a terrible accident on Highway 50 during freezing rain. Single car collision, vehicle rollover. No witnesses who saw the exact moment. By the time I got the call, I was already married to Lee. He had driven me to identify some of her things. He held my hand at the funeral. He helped my parents with paperwork. He had been calm, capable, and protective in all the ways a husband is supposed to be when tragedy destroys your family. Leah's baby girl had supposedly died too. That was what we had all been told. The file was complicated, they said. The authorities handled what needed handling, they said. It was such a blur back then that I barely remember how the explanation was given. I only remember my mother collapsing against me in black gloves outside the church, saying, "They're both gone." After that, nobody in my family could talk about it for long. My father's health worsened. My mother became quieter each year. I stopped asking questions because grief itself felt like a full-time job. I hadn't connected Leah to anything in my marriage until much later. At that stage, she was simply one more source of sadness in me, one more room inside my chest I tried not to enter. January settled over everything like a dull gray lid. Lee became even more distant. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until after midnight. Sometimes he said he had to leave early for warehouse calls in Laval or deliveries near Cornwall or meetings near Kingston, though none of those explanations quite fit the nature of his job. He slept with his phone under his pillow once, and when I made a face about it, he told me I was imagining things. One Saturday morning, I tried one last time to talk to him properly. He was in the garage pretending to organize tools while a radio station crackled hockey updates in the background. Cold air rushed in each time the side door opened. I stood there in thick socks and a wool sweater, hands tucked into my sleeves. "Can we sit down and be honest?" I asked. He didn't turn around. "About what now?" "About us." He set down a screwdriver with too much force. "There is no us conversation every weekend, Julia. I'm your wife. I deserve the truth." "The truth about what?" I almost laughed from frustration. "About why you lied to me. About why you hide your phone. About who the child is." That made him turn. For 1 second I saw naked panic. Then anger swallowed it. "What child?" "The little girl I saw you with." His face hardened so fast it frightened me. "You followed me?" "I saw you by accident." "No. What you do is watch and build stories. You twist everything." "I saw you with my own eyes." He stepped closer. Not enough to touch me, just enough to make me feel crowded. "Then maybe use those eyes to look at yourself and ask why you're this desperate to catch me in something." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Desperate.
Yes, desperate.
Lonely. Suspicious. You need every silence to mean betrayal because otherwise you'd have to sit with your own issues. My whole body went cold. That was gaslighting so clean and practiced, it almost sounded reasonable if you didn't know better. I said, "You're making me feel crazy on purpose." He gave a dry, tired laugh. "Nobody has to make you feel anything. You do that on your own." I left the garage shaking. For the rest of that day, I barely spoke. Lee acted as though nothing had happened. He made coffee. He watched sports highlights. He asked if we needed milk from the grocery store. The normalcy of it made me feel even worse, like the cruelty in my marriage had become so ordinary he didn't even recognize it anymore. That night, I called my mother. She lived in a condo near Kingston by then, downsized after my father died 2 years earlier. Her voice was thin and fragile over the line, but still gentle. "How are you, sweetheart?" she asked. I almost lied. I almost said I was fine, because that had become my default survival answer. But something in me cracked, and I said, "Mom, did you ever think there were things we didn't know about Leah's accident?" Silence. Then, "Why are you asking that?" "I don't know. I've been thinking about her." She exhaled shakily. There were always loose ends, but when people are grieving, they accept whatever version lets them keep breathing. The words hit me hard. Loose ends. "The police report was delayed," she said quietly. Some records were difficult to obtain. There was confusion about where Leah had been staying in the weeks before. I wanted to push more, but your father was falling apart. Then everyone said the baby was gone too, and her voice broke. I had nothing left in me. I pressed my hand over my mouth. "Why didn't you ever tell me that? What good would it have done? You were newly married. I didn't want to drag you into old pain." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed in darkness, hearing the old house creak against the winter wind. Loose ends. That phrase joined everything else already knotted inside me. The law office paper. The child's name. The girl in the pink hat. Lee's lies. Ray's strange comments. My sister's accident. I still didn't know how any of it connected, but I could feel the shape of something hidden. A pattern under the floorboards. Then came the night that changed my life. It was a Tuesday in late January, bitterly cold, the kind of cold that makes the windows whisper and the air itself feel sharp. Lee came home after midnight, claiming a truck issue had delayed him. He smelled like outside air and stale coffee. I pretended to be asleep when he got into bed because I was too exhausted for another argument. At some point I must have drifted off for real, because the next thing I knew, the room was dark except for a brief, white glow near Lee's pillow. His phone. The screen had lit up. Lee was breathing heavily, deep asleep beside me, one arm thrown over the blanket. Normally he would have tucked the phone under him or turned it face down. This time, maybe because he was more tired than usual, it lay near the edge of the mattress. I stared at it. The glow faded. Then it lit again. My heartbeat began thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a long second I argued with myself. Don't do it. Do it. You already know. Maybe you don't. Maybe this is the line you can't come back from. Maybe the marriage is already past lines. Very slowly, carefully, I reached for the phone. My fingers felt numb. The lock screen was still visible. One message. Unknown number. She's asking for you again. Same address. Don't make her wait. I stopped breathing. Not because it confirmed cheating, though that was my first thought, but because of the wording. Again. Same address. Don't make her wait.
Who is she?
Why the secrecy? Why would someone else be arranging contact this way? My eyes scanned the top of the screen for anything that might help. The number wasn't saved. There was no preview above it. But there was just enough time before the phone dimmed for me to see the first line of older notifications underneath. One from a weather alert and one partial email subject from a law office. I put the phone back exactly where it had been. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit up. Beside the bed on my nightstand was an old receipt and a pen. In the weak light from the snow-reflected window, I wrote down the number from memory, as best I could. Then I sat frozen, staring into the dark.
Go there, one part of me said.
At 2 in the morning?
Yes.
Wait until morning.
No.
If he wakes up and realizes the message came through, he might go first. He might delete things. He might move whatever he's hiding. I looked at Lee sleeping peacefully beside me, the same man who used to bring me soup when I was sick, the same man who had stood beside me at my father's funeral, the same man who now felt like a stranger, wearing my husband's face. I got out of bed without turning on the light. I put on thermal leggings under my jeans, pulled a sweater over my pajama top, shoved my feet into winter boots, and zipped up my long black coat. My hands were so cold with nerves, I fumbled the zipper twice. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and my phone. At the bedroom door, I looked back once. Lee didn't move. The house was silent except for the furnace and the old refrigerator downstairs. Outside, the cold hit like a slap. The street was empty, lined with frozen parked cars and houses crouched under snowbanks. My breath came out in white bursts as I hurried to my car. The engine complained in the cold before finally turning over. I punched the number into my phone first, searching it. Nothing useful came up. Then I copied the address from the note I had made as carefully as I could from the message notification and set the map. It led me farther east than I expected, toward an older residential area near the edge of town where the streets grew narrower and the houses looked smaller, older, more worn down by years of winter. My windshield wipers scraped at thin ice. Streetlights threw pale orange pools over hard-packed snow. Every red light felt too long. The whole drive, my brain tried to create an explanation that would hurt less. Maybe she was sick. Maybe he had been helping someone. Maybe the child belonged to a cousin. Maybe the message sounded wrong because I was panicking. But underneath all those desperate possibilities was a darker fear I couldn't yet name. When I finally turned onto the street, I almost missed the house. It was a modest one-story place with faded blue siding, a small front porch, and a chain-link fence half buried in snow. One upstairs window glowed softly through curtains printed with tiny stars. A child's room, I thought immediately. The driveway held one older sedan dusted with fresh snow. No sign of Lee's vehicle. I parked half a block away and sat there with both hands gripping the wheel. I could still leave. I could come back in daylight. I could pretend I had never seen the message. Instead, I got out. My boots crunched loudly on the snow, every step feeling illegal. The neighborhood was so quiet I could hear the distant hum of a snowplow somewhere on a larger road. A porch light flickered on 2 houses down, then off again. I moved closer to the fence line of the blue house, heart hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. The living room curtains weren't fully closed. There was a lamp on inside, warm yellow light spilling over a sofa, a crocheted blanket, a shelf of children's books, and framed family photos on the wall. I don't think I fully understood what I was seeing at first. My eyes landed on one large framed photo sitting atop a narrow console near the entry. A woman with dark hair, a little girl with a missing front tooth,
and Lee.
Lee standing between them with one hand on the child's shoulder and the other around the woman's back, smiling the kind of easy smile I had not seen from him in years. For a second the world made no sound, no wind, no distant traffic, no scrape of boots, nothing. I just stood there staring through that cold pane of glass as if my body had turned to ice from the inside out. Family. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't one hotel room. One lie, one stupid mistake. He had a life there. A real one. A place where his face belonged in frames. My stomach twisted so violently I had to grab the fence post to stay standing. Then a shape moved deeper inside the house. A little girl ran through the hall in footed pajamas, and even from where I stood outside in the freezing dark, something about the side of her face struck me like a blow. Not because she looked like Lee, because she didn't. She looked familiar in a different, older way. The turn of the chin, the shape of the eyes, a quick expression that opened a locked room in my memory so hard it made my knees weaken.
Leah.
I saw Leah for one flash inside that child's face. I took one stumbling step backward, my breath catching so sharply it burned. My sister's smile hit me out of nowhere then. The old one from before the accident had tipped back, laughing too loud at a summer barbecue. The child inside the house had that same light in her face. No, I whispered to no one. And then, from inside the house, I heard a woman's voice say softly, "Mia, sweetheart, back to bed. He's not coming tonight."
Mia.
The name from the paper. The child's room light upstairs still glowing. My husband's photo on the wall. My sister's face in that little girl. I stood in the snow with my gloved hand pressed over my mouth, frozen in a way I had never understood until that moment. Not frozen because I was afraid to move. Frozen because my entire life had just cracked open and my mind could not yet hold what was spilling out of it. Somewhere behind me, a car turned onto the street. I flinched and stepped back into the shadow beside a bare hedge, my pulse exploding. Headlights slid across the snow, and then I saw the vehicle slow near the blue house. I knew that shape. I knew those headlights. It was Lee. I dropped lower behind the hedge as Lee pulled into the driveway. The beam of his headlights swept over the snow, then cut off. For a second, everything went dark except for the porch light and the soft yellow glow from the living room. My legs were shaking so badly, I had to grip the icy metal fence with both hands. The driver's door opened. Lee stepped out in the same dark winter coat he had worn to bed only an hour earlier, which meant he had either dressed in the car or never truly been asleep when I left. He moved quickly, with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going and had done it many times before. He didn't look around. He didn't hesitate. He just took a small paper bag from the passenger seat, walked to the porch, and let himself in with a key.
A key.
That hit me almost as hard as the photograph. He didn't knock. He didn't text. He opened the door to that house the way he opened the front door to mine. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up the walkway and smash every lie out into the open. But something deeper than anger kept me still. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear. Maybe the sudden understanding that if this was truly connected to Leah, then walking in without a plan could destroy the only chance I had to uncover the truth. I stayed where I was for another minute, maybe two. Long enough to see the living room shift with movement. Long enough to see Lee's silhouette cross behind the curtains. Long enough for the little girl to run toward him and leap up as if she had done that 100 times before. Then I turned and went back to my car. I don't remember most of the drive home. Only pieces. My fingers slipping on the steering wheel. The heater running too high. A stoplight changing from red to green while I sat there too long. The taste of metal in my mouth from clenching my jaw. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the eastern edge of the sky was still black, but there was that faint thin change in the dark that comes before dawn in winter. I went inside quietly, hung up my coat, took off my boots, and stood in the kitchen listening to the house. Everything looked exactly the same as it had when I left. The fruit bowl on the island, the unopened mail, the snow glare on the window. But nothing was the same. I went upstairs, crawled into bed fully dressed except for my coat, and lay there staring at the ceiling. When Lee came back, it was just after 4:30. I heard the garage door hum, then the soft steps in the hallway. He moved carefully, thinking I was asleep. He undressed in the dark. The mattress dipped as he got in beside me. His body carried a faint smell I couldn't place at first, then realized was laundry detergent from a different house and the sugary smell of a child's shampoo. I nearly broke right there. Instead, I kept my breathing slow, and even until he settled, I did not sleep again. At 8 the next morning, Lee rolled over and stretched like a man who had simply spent a normal night in his own home. He looked at me and said, "You're up early." I stared back at him. "Did you ever go back out last night?" His face stayed blank for a fraction of a second too long. "No," he said. "Why would I?" I felt something inside me finish dying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly and completely. Because I knew then that whatever I did next could no longer be about saving the marriage. It had to be about finding the truth. "I thought I heard the garage," I said. "You must have dreamed it." He kissed my forehead and went to shower. I sat on the bed gripping the blanket, so tightly my fingers hurt. Dreamed it. He had walked into another home with his own key, held another child in his arms, come back to my bed before sunrise, and still looked me in the face like I was the unstable one. That morning, after he left for work, I made coffee I couldn't drink and opened my laptop at the dining table. My whole body felt like one exposed nerve, but my mind had suddenly become cold and methodical. I wrote down everything: the text message, the number, the address, the trust paper with Mia's name, the date I saw him with the little girl outside the cafe, the exact words my mother had used. There were always loose ends. Then I called the only person I trusted enough to say any of it out loud to. Her name was Maya. Not Lee's sister-in-law Maya. A different Maya. My friend from college, now a legal assistant in Ottawa who had spent enough years around family lawyers and estate files to recognize when something smelled wrong. She was one of those rare people who could be soft with you and sharp for you at the same time. When she answered, I said, "Can you meet me today? Please don't ask me to explain on the phone." She heard something in my voice and didn't hesitate.
Noon.
Little cafe on Elgin. I'll be there. I almost canceled 3 times before I left the house. Part of me still wanted to bury all of it, pretend I had misunderstood, go back to being the wife who only suspected betrayal, and not something much darker. But once your eyes have fully opened, trying to close them again feels like suffocating yourself on purpose. Maya was already there when I arrived, wrapped in a long camel coat, her curly hair tucked under a wool hat, one hand around a teacup. The cafe windows were fogged from the difference between indoor heat and outdoor cold. People in thick parkas came and went with boots squeaking on the wet tile near the entrance. The second I sat down, she said, "Tell me everything."
So I did.
Not gracefully, not in order. I told her about the late nights, the phone secrecy, the law office paper, the little girl, the framed photo, the key, the message at 2 in the morning. When I got to the part about seeing Leah in the child's face, I started crying so hard I had to stop twice. Maya didn't interrupt. She only listened with the kind of stillness that makes it safe to keep going. When I finished, she leaned back and said very quietly, "Okay, first, you are not crazy. Second, do not confront him yet." I let out a shaky breath. I want to tear the whole house down. I know. But if this involves a child and possibly your sister's death, emotion is not enough. You need records. You need names. You need a paper trail. I wiped my face. Where do I even start? With the law office. With the number. With anything official tied to that address. And Julia? Her eyes held mine. If the little girl is really connected to Leah, you need to be careful. This is bigger than an affair. That sentence settled into me like a weight and a guide at the same time. Bigger than an affair. That afternoon, Maya helped me search public databases that an ordinary person could access with enough patience. Property lookup, corporate registry links, old archive notices. We didn't find everything, but we found enough to keep going. The blue house was rented, not owned. The utility account wasn't public, but the mailing contact attached to an older municipal filing showed the surname Spencer. The unknown number that texted Lee traced back, loosely, to a prepaid mobile with no useful listing. Then Maya said, "Let's go back to the law office clue. You said Gatineau." I nodded. We looked up the law firm name I remembered from the paper. It was real, mid-sized. They handled trusts, estates, and guardianship matters. "Call them," Maya said. "I can't just say hello. I think my husband has a secret child who may be my dead sister's daughter." "You don't have to. Ask whether they can confirm a file reference exists. Sometimes reception gives more away than they should." I felt sick doing it, but I called. The receptionist was polite and careful, exactly as you'd expect. She would not discuss a client matter. She would not confirm names. But when I gave the file number from memory, there was a pause long enough to tell me I had not imagined it. "I'm sorry," she said, suddenly more formal. "I can't release any information on that file." My pulse jumped. "Can you at least tell me if it concerns a trust?" "I can't discuss the nature of any matter." That should have been the end of it. But then she added, maybe because I sounded so shaky, "If you are an authorized family representative, you would need proper documentation, especially in a matter involving a minor." A matter involving a minor. I thanked her and hung up. Maya looked at me. "That's real." I nodded, unable to speak. "Then next step," she said, "we find out who Spencer is." Over the next week, my life split in two. On the surface, I played my usual role. I made coffee. I answered work emails. I nodded when Lee complained about transportation delays and staffing problems. At night, I lay beside him while every cell in my body recoiled from the weight of his arm crossing my side, as if he still had the right. Underneath, I started digging. I drove past the blue house twice more during daylight and once in the early evening. I never got close enough to be seen, but I saw the woman from the window come out carrying grocery bags. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair, tired posture, no expensive clothes, no polished affair partner glamour. She looked more like someone who had been surviving than seducing. Once, I saw Mia in the yard, bundled in a purple snowsuit, making a lopsided snow fort near the porch. Even from across the street, she looked like Leah so strongly it hurt me physically. I called my mother again and asked for every detail she could remember about the aftermath of Leah's accident. She cried twice during that conversation. She remembered the hospital confusion. She remembered never seeing the baby herself. She remembered being told paperwork would take time because there had been sensitive circumstances. Most of all, she remembered Lee helping a lot more than anyone had asked him to. That part made my blood run cold. Back then I thought he was just being kind, she said. I closed my eyes. Mom, was Lee already close to Leah before I married him? No, she said slowly. Not close. But he met her several times, especially in the months before the accident. He drove you both to one family dinner, remember? And I think he helped once when Leah's car broke down. I did remember that. At the time it had seemed harmless. Now every old memory came back with new poison in it. 2 Fridays later, I got my first real break. Lee forgot to log out of our shared laptop browser profile. He had been searching for snow removal rates and hockey scores earlier, nothing unusual. But when I opened the browser history while he was in the shower, I saw recent searches connected to child counseling services, one elementary school website, and a PDF about changing legal guardianship documentation in Ontario. My breath caught. I clicked the school site. There, on a page for a winter fundraiser, was a list of volunteer donors. Most were first names only. One line read, Mia S. and family. No full surname. No miracle proof. But enough to tighten the knot. I took screenshots and emailed them to myself, then deleted the sent message from the laptop and from the trash folder with hands that would not stop shaking. The next Monday, Maya took a late lunch and met me again. After hearing about the guardianship search, she said, "At this point you need a lawyer, not just a friend with instincts. I don't have the money for a full legal war. You don't need a war yet. You need advice." She referred me to a family lawyer named Foster in Ottawa, a practical woman with silver hair and the kind of directness that made people sit up straighter. I booked a private consultation under the excuse of a dental appointment and drove there in freezing rain that turned the roads to gray slush. Foster listened to the whole story with folded hands and very little expression. When I finished, she asked only 3 questions. Do you have proof your husband spends time at that address? Not hard proof yet. Do you have any official reason to believe the child is your sister's? Only my intuition, the resemblance, and the loose ends around Leah's death. And do you believe the child is unsafe? That one hit me hardest. I thought of Mia's room light, the family photo, the ordinary warmth of the house. I don't know, I admitted. She didn't look mistreated, but I think her entire life may be built on lies. Foster nodded once. Then you proceed carefully. We protect evidence. We do not accuse without support. And if you uncover fraud, guardianship deception, or criminal concealment related to your sister, that moves beyond family court. When I left her office, I sat in my car for 10 full minutes with the engine off, letting the cold creep in around me. Beyond family court, beyond marriage, beyond cheating. My whole body felt tired clear down to the bone. That night, Lee came home oddly cheerful for the first time in months. He even brought takeout from Swiss Chalet and asked if I wanted extra sauce. Watching him place the bag on the counter, like some ordinary husband, made something vicious rise in me. I said, "Trying to be nice all of a sudden?" He gave me a puzzled look. "I'm bringing dinner home." "Right." He sighed. You're impossible lately. There it was again. That smooth reversal. He lies, and I become impossible. He hides a life, and I become difficult. I smiled at him then, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the first mask I had worn in my marriage, and the second it formed on my face, I understood that survival had changed me. Thanks, I said. Long day. His shoulders loosened. He thought the fog was returning. He thought I was sinking back into silence.
Good.
Because a few days later, the truth finally cracked open wider. It happened because Mia got sick. That same unknown number sent another message at 6:14 p.m. while Lee was in the shower and his phone lay charging on the kitchen counter. She has a fever. Bring the paperwork, too. My hand closed around the edge of the counter, so hard my knuckles hurt.
Paperwork. I did not touch the phone this time.
I only memorized the message and stepped away before the shower stopped. Lee came downstairs 20 minutes later, already dressed to go out. Emergency at work, he said. I looked up from my laptop with practiced calm. Again, truck issue. Of course. He grabbed a thick envelope from the hall closet shelf, the very place he thought I never checked, and left. The second his car disappeared, I called Maya. He took paperwork to the house, I said. He said work. It's not work. Then follow him, she said instantly. But don't go alone. She met me near a Tim Hortons parking lot 10 minutes later and got into my car. Snow was coming down in thin, dry streaks, the kind that looked light until it covered everything. We drove in silence until Lee's vehicle appeared 3 cars ahead of us. He went straight to the blue house. This time we watched from farther away. We saw him rush inside. An hour later, a doctor's after-hours clinic vehicle pulled up. Another hour after that, a woman from inside came out with Lee and Mia wrapped in a blanket. They got into his car, and he drove them toward the clinic on Innes Road. Inside the waiting area, Maya and I sat where they couldn't easily see us. The fluorescent lights made everyone look tired and pale. Children coughed. A vending machine buzzed. The woman kept stroking Mia's hair while Lee handled the receptionist paperwork. That was when we got the surname. The receptionist called Mia Spencer? The woman stood up. So did Lee. Not as husband and wife exactly. More like 2 adults long used to sharing a burden. I watched him lead Mia through the clinic doors and knew with sudden certainty that whatever story he had built around this child had been going on for years. When they finally left, Maya grabbed my wrist. We need the woman's full name. We got it by waiting until the receptionist stepped away and then listening while another staff member called after a forgotten mitten. Miss Spencer. The woman turned. Dark hair, tired eyes, green parka, Spencer. At home that night, I barely slept. By morning, Maya had already found a likely match through a social media archive and old cache search results. Spencer Martin, formerly listed as a personal support worker in Eastern Ontario. No recent public profile. One old tagged photo from years ago in which she stood beside. I nearly dropped the phone when I saw it.
Leah.
Younger.
Smiling.
Pregnant. And Spencer beside her. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the image until my vision blurred. Maya called right after. Do you know her? No, I said weakly. But she knew Leah. Then this is not random. No, it was not random. It was a buried world connecting itself piece by piece. That afternoon, I drove to my mother's place and showed her the old photo. The second she saw Spencer, my mother gasped. She was there, she whispered. Where? At the hospital. After the accident. Not long. Maybe only once. But I remember her face because she was crying in the corridor and Lee was talking to her. The room seemed to tilt. Mom, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't know it mattered, she said, voice shaking. I thought she was some friend of Leah's. Everything was chaos. I pressed the heel of my hand to my forehead. It all mattered. Every tiny thing that had once been dismissed as grief fog now mattered. That evening, after another quiet strategy call with Foster, we made a decision. I was going to speak to Spencer directly. Not with Lee there. Not in front of Mia. Not as an ambush. Foster warned me to stay calm, not accuse, and get what I could without revealing everything I knew. If Spencer was part of the lie, she might shut down. If she was trapped in it too, she might finally break. 2 mornings later, I waited until Lee had left for work and drove to the blue house in daylight. My knees felt weak all the way to the porch. When Spencer opened the door, her face drained of color so fast that I knew at once she recognized me. Not just as Lee's wife, as Leah's sister. For 3 full seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "I need to talk to you about Mia." Her hand tightened on the door. "I think you have the wrong house." "No," I said quietly. "I think this is exactly the right house." From deeper inside, I heard cartoons playing softly. A child's laugh. Spencer looked over her shoulder, then back at me, panicked in a way that felt old and exhausted. "You need to leave." I saw the photo. "I know Lee comes here. I know you knew my sister." At the mention of Leah, her eyes filled instantly. That was all it took.
The whole shape of her changed.
Whatever wall she had built was still standing, but cracks ran through all of it. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. Snow creaked under our boots. Her face looked worn, almost hollow, up close. "What do you want?" she whispered. "The truth." She laughed once, bitterly. "The truth is poison. I think I've been drinking it for years." Her mouth trembled. Asked the question as carefully as I could. "Who is Mia?" Spencer shut her eyes. When she opened them again, she looked as if she had finally run out of strength to lie. "She's Leah's daughter." Even though I already believed it, hearing the words out loud hit like a physical blow. I grabbed the porch railing to steady myself. "No," I whispered, tears already burning my eyes. "They told us she died." "I know. Why would they say that?" Spencer looked at the street, not at me. "Because Leah was never supposed to survive long enough to tell anyone what she found." My whole body went cold. "What are you saying?" Her voice dropped lower. "Leah found out money had been moved through an insurance claim linked to a transport accident years ago. She thought Lee was helping her sort documents because he understood that system through work. Instead, he was helping someone cover tracks. Ray knew people. Martin knew pieces. I never knew all of it. Only enough to know Leah was scared. The names made my stomach turn.
Ray.
Martin.
Lee.
A family disease, not one liar. Spencer continued, speaking in little broken bursts like someone opening doors she had kept nailed shut. Leah had planned to leave Ontario with the baby after the birth. She had gathered copies of financial records and messages. Spencer was helping her quietly because they had become close through prenatal support appointments. On the night of the accident, Leah had called Spencer frightened and said Lee wanted to meet and explain something near Highway 50. Leah believed she could pressure him into helping expose the fraud. Instead, there was a crash in freezing rain. Leah died. The baby survived. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. Spencer was crying now too. Lee came to me after. He said if I talked, they would make it look like I was unstable and I'd lose everything. He said the baby would go into the system while your family fought and grieved. He said he could protect her if I stayed quiet. He used Leah's confusion at the hospital and the paperwork delays to bury her. He made sure everyone believed the baby was gone. "And you let him?" The words came out raw. She flinched. I was 26, broke, terrified, and grieving too. Mia had medical issues as an infant. I thought if I fought him then, they'd take her away from both of us. He started a trust with money that was partly Leah's, partly hush money, I think. He visited. He controlled everything. Every year, I told myself I would fix it. Every year, it got harder. I covered my mouth and turned away, sobbing once into my glove before I could stop it. Everything inside me was splitting at once. Fury at Lee. Fury at Spencer. Horror for Leah. A grief so sharp for the years stolen from Mia that I could barely stand up under it. When I could speak again, I asked, "Does Mia know?" "No," Spencer said. "She thinks Lee is a family friend who helps us. She calls him Uncle Lee." That tiny detail cut deeper than all the others. Uncle Lee. The man who had lied in my bed and stood in my kitchen had been playing both rescuer and jailer in a child's life built on stolen identity. I turned back to Spencer. Why the family photos? She looked ashamed. Because for Mia, it was easier to explain him if he seemed constant. Because I was stupid. Because sometimes he'd act kind, and I would confuse control with support. Because I got trapped in a lie, and then I helped maintain it. At least that was honest. I took a long, shaky breath. Do you have proof? Anything Leah left? Anything Lee signed? Anything about the trust? Spencer nodded slowly. I kept copies. Not because I'm brave. Because I was scared one day I'd need to save Mia. Then help me do it. She stared at me. And in that moment, I think both of us understood that whatever we had been before, wife, witness, coward, accomplice, victim, we were now standing on the same edge. If we moved backward, Mia's life stayed buried. If we moved forward, everything would explode. Spencer whispered, "He's going to destroy me." "No," I said, and for the first time in months my voice did not shake. "He's not." From that day on, my fear became work. Spencer gave us copies of what she had hidden. Old messages from Leah, photos of documents, trust statements with Mia listed under a concealed legal structure, appointment logs, and one voice note Leah had sent 3 days before the crash saying, "If anything happens to me, don't trust Lee. He knows what Ray is doing with the claim money." When I heard Leah's voice after all those years, I collapsed into tears so hard Maya had to pause the recording. Foster moved fast after that. Not reckless, not dramatic. Fast in the way Compton people do when they finally have real evidence. She brought in a criminal lawyer contact for guidance. She helped us organize the timeline. She instructed me not to confront Lee privately under any circumstances. She also advised that before going fully to police, we secure a safe route regarding Mia's legal identity and welfare so the child would not become collateral damage in the mess adults created around her. At the same time, I filed quietly for a financial records review in preparation for separation. I did not tell Lee. I let him think the house was still his stage, and I was still the audience. During those weeks, I became someone I had never been before. I documented every late return, every message preview I could safely see, every odd expense, every visit to the hall closet shelf where he kept envelopes. I moved through my own life with the eerie calm of someone crossing thin ice and refusing to look down. One evening, he put his hand on my shoulder while I washed dishes and said, almost casually, "You've been quiet lately." I kept my eyes on the sink. Maybe I got tired. Tired of what? Being told I'm imagining things. He withdrew his hand. Good. By early March, Foster believed we had enough for 2 separate moves: a private meeting with police regarding Leah's crash and potential concealment, and a controlled confrontation in a formal setting where Lee could not easily twist the narrative. The setting turned out to be one he never expected me to use: Ray's birthday dinner. Every year, she hosted one at a private room in a restaurant in downtown Ottawa, the kind of place with low lighting, polished cutlery, and too many people pretending to be warmer than they were. Lee assumed I would attend quietly, smile when needed, and survive his family the way I always had. Instead, I prepared. Maya came with me as moral support. Foster came too, officially as my legal counsel for the marital and trust-related matters already developing. Spencer did not come inside at first. She waited nearby with Mia and another trusted woman arranged through Foster's network, ready only if needed. Police were not sitting at the table, but they had already been briefed and were prepared for formal follow-up immediately after the meeting if Lee reacted badly or tried to destroy evidence. When I arrived at the restaurant, Ray was wearing cream silk and pearls. Martin was there. His wife Maya was there too, all bright lipstick and fake concern. Lee looked mildly annoyed to see Foster with me. "What is this?" he muttered as he pulled out my chair. "My evening," I said. Throughout appetizers, I barely spoke. Let them think I was intimidated. Let them eat and laugh and perform their polished normal. Then, halfway through the main course, Ray raised her glass and said, "Family is everything at this age. We should appreciate what remains stable." Something in me almost laughed. I set down my fork. "Funny you should say that," I said. The table quieted. Lee looked at me sharply. "Julia." "No," I said. Let's not do what we always do. Let's not call me dramatic before I finish speaking. Ray gave a thin smile. If this is another emotional scene, it's not emotional, Foster said calmly. It's documented. That changed the air at once. Martin's posture shifted. Lee went very still. I reached into my bag and placed several envelopes on the table. Copies only. The originals were elsewhere, safe. What is this? Lee asked, but there was already a crack in his voice. I looked directly at him. The address, the messages, the trust account, the school records, the guardianship research, Leah's voice note, and the proof that Mia is not some random child you've been helping out of kindness. Ray's hand froze around her wine glass. Martin muttered, "What the hell is she talking about?" I turned to him. "Ask your brother how often he visited the little girl your family helped erase." Lee's face lost color so fast it was almost unbelievable. "Julia, stop," he said low and hard. I had waited too long for that moment to stop now. "No," I said. "You told my family Leah's baby died. You let them bury two people when only one had died. You helped hide her child for years while controlling the money attached to her. And you came home to my bed after playing family in another house." Maya at the table whispered, "Oh my God." Ray said, far too quickly, "This is absurd." Foster slid one paper toward her. "Is it? Because here is the trust documentation referencing the child. Here is a hospital corridor photograph time-stamped after the crash. Here is archived communication between Leah and Ms. Spencer. And here," she tapped another page, "is the voice note in transcript form, naming Lee and implying financial misconduct connected to an accident claim." Martin pushed his chair back slightly. "Lee." Lee looked at him, then at Ray, then at me. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "It's not what it looks like," he said. There it was. The oldest liar's line in the world. I almost smiled from the bitterness of it. "Then tell them," I said. "Tell them what it is." He raked a hand through his hair. Leah was unstable at the end. She kept making accusations. The baby situation was complicated. Spencer couldn't manage. I was trying to keep things from getting worse. By telling everyone the child was dead, my voice rose then, sharp enough to cut through the room. Nearby diners had begun glancing over.
"It was temporary," he snapped.
"You don't understand how messy it was." I leaned forward. "Then help me understand why your mother knew enough to humiliate me for not giving you children while you were secretly helping raise my sister's daughter." Ray's lips parted, but no sound came out. That was the first time I saw real fear on her face. Not irritation. Not superiority.
Fear.
Foster turned on a tablet and played only a short section of Leah's old voice note. Just enough. "If anything happens to me, don't trust Lee. He knows what Ray is doing with the claim money." Leah's voice in that private room changed everything. No one could dismiss me as jealous then. No one could call it a wife's insecurity. The dead had entered the room and spoken. Martin stood up, so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. "Mom," Ray went pale. "Sit down." "What claim money?" he demanded. Lee hissed, "Shut up." That was when the mask fully fell. The polished family image cracked in front of everyone. Ray's fingers trembled so badly, she spilled wine on the tablecloth. Lee looked cornered, sweating now despite the cool room. Maya stared from one face to another, like she no longer knew who she had married into. And I, the woman they had trained to doubt herself, felt calmer with each second. I pulled out one last item. The family photo from inside the blue house, printed from a picture Spencer had provided of the frame. I set it down in the middle of the table. "This," I said softly, "is what you were doing while telling me I was paranoid." Lee shut his eyes. Martin whispered a curse. Ray made a sound I can only describe as the sound pride makes when it finally realizes it cannot save itself. At that point, Foster gave Lee a final chance to say something sensible.
He didn't.
He started talking fast about misunderstandings, protecting a child, grief, difficult circumstances, everybody doing their best. Nothing honest. Nothing clean. So Foster ended it. "My client has already initiated contact with law enforcement and appropriate legal channels," she said. Any further destruction of records or harassment toward Miss Julia will be documented. The table fell into stunned silence. Lee stared at me as if he had only just realized I was no longer under his control. "Police?" he said. "Yes," I answered. For the first time in all the years I had known him, he truly looked afraid. The dinner ended in chaos. Martin stormed out. Maya followed him in tears. Ray remained sitting for a few seconds too long, as if her body couldn't adjust to the fact that power had left her. Then she stood, but her knees seemed weak. She looked older in that moment than I had ever seen her. As for Lee, he tried to catch me outside the private room. "Julia, please. Let me explain." I turned to face him in the hallway under the dim restaurant lights. "You explained for years. Every lie was an explanation." His face crumpled then, but I felt nothing except disgust. "You ruined everything over one side of the story," he said. I almost laughed.
No, Lee.
"You ruined everything because you thought everyone else was too broken, too trusting, or too scared to put the story together." Then I walked away. The following months were long, exhausting, and not magically clean. Real life never wraps itself up in one perfect courtroom speech and then fades out with music. There were statements to give, records to trace, legal processes that move slowly and sometimes cruelly. Police reopened questions around Leah's death and the concealment of Mia's survival and identity history. Financial irregularities tied to old claim money and trust handling drew serious attention. Not every detail became public at once, and not every wrong could be perfectly repaired. But the lies were no longer safe. That mattered. I filed for divorce. Lee moved out before the formal process was complete, not out of dignity, but because there was no room left for him in the life he had shattered. His reputation at work took a hard hit once investigators started asking questions about old records and his access to certain files. Ray withdrew from almost everyone for a while, and people who had once admired her elegance started treating her with the careful distance reserved for families carrying a secret too ugly to touch. As for Martin, I heard he turned on both of them the second he realized the money trail might stain him by association. That family had always worshipped loyalty when it protected them and abandoned it the moment consequences arrived. Spencer began cooperating fully. I won't pretend forgiveness came easily there. Some days I looked at her and saw years stolen from my family. Other days I saw a frightened young woman who had made cowardly choices under the pressure of men and money and fear. Both things were true. Life is ugly that way. What mattered most was Mia. With proper legal guidance and child protection support, the truth of her identity began to be corrected carefully, in ways meant to protect her heart as much as possible. She was still the same little girl who liked star-print curtains and purple mittens and hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. She was still innocent. None of the adults deserved the softness with which she entered every room. The first time she met me properly, months after the confrontation, Spencer had prepared her gently by saying I was her mother Leah's sister. Mia looked at me with those same Leah eyes and asked, "So you're my aunt?" I nodded, already crying. She thought about that for a second, then held up a drawing of a house and said, "Do you want to see my picture?" That was how it began. Not with some dramatic reunion, with a child holding out paper and trust in the same small hand. My life after that was not a fairy tale, but it was mine. I moved into a smaller townhouse in Orleans with better light in the kitchen and a little patch of backyard that filled with dandelions in spring. I kept working, took on more clients, and slowly built routines that didn't revolve around tension. I slept better once I no longer listened for lies in the driveway at midnight. I started therapy. I visited my mother more often. I learned that peace does not always arrive like joy. Sometimes it arrives first as quiet. There were still hard days. Days when I missed the version of my marriage I thought I had. Days when Leah's absence felt freshly unbearable. Days when anger returned so hot I had to walk around the block in freezing wind just to breathe it out. But there were also new days. Days when Mia came over with Spencer and we baked boxed brownies and got chocolate batter on the counter. Days when my mother laughed for real again after years of sounding like grief had taken up permanent rent in her throat. Days when I stood at my own window with a mug in my hand and realized no one inside my home was trying to make me doubt what I knew. That kind of safety is wholly after chaos. One evening in early autumn, Mia sat at my table drawing trees with orange leaves and asked, "Was my mom nice?" The whole room went soft around that question. I smiled through tears and said, "She was brave."
Loud.
Funny. And she loved deeply. Mia nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing. That night, after she left, I stood alone in my kitchen and thought about the woman I used to be. The wife staring at a glowing phone at 2 in the morning. The woman standing outside a blue house in the snow, too shocked to move. The woman everyone around her had trained to distrust her own instincts. She saved me, I realized, not because she was strong yet, because she was finally done lying to herself. From everything I went through, I learned that betrayal is terrifying, but the most dangerous thing is when people train you to doubt your own eyes and your own memory. If something in your life feels wrong over and over again, please don't keep shrinking yourself just to make other people comfortable. And if the truth scares you, remember this: the truth may break your old life, but sometimes that is exactly how your real life begins. Before you go, tell me in the comments this. If you were in my place, at what moment would you have stopped giving Lee the benefit of the doubt? I really want to know, because some of us notice the truth early, and some of us only understand it after the damage is already deep. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder, leave a like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.